What's up, my brothers? In this video, we have two important topics to cover. It's a requested video from a gentleman that's been divorced. So there'll be lessons in here for guys thinking about marriage and what that looks like and the responsibilities that come with that. And the second part will be, how do you manage a situation where basically the subject of his email is children are used as leverage after the divorce? We'll hop right into this. I'll throw it up on the screen, take a few notes. He says, hey, Rich, enjoy your videos. Need some advice. I went through a nasty divorce. The ex and I went through the typical scenario where we just fell out of love, is what he put in quotations, with each other. Loss of attraction and friendship and everything. After our third child, the relationship took a slow turn for the worst. And the worst was absolutely miserable. I'm going to say that again. The worst was absolutely miserable. For all you traditional conservatives out there that are thinking just wife or what could possibly go wrong, sit tight. You're going to come across it right now. At the time, I thought of myself as a hardworking, honorable husband. So in my mind, I would just put in the effort, get the big house, the nice cars, and prove myself as the man she wanted. And to put it bluntly, I worked my ass off. I worked in the steel industry and would come home dehydrated and physically ill. But I raked in as much dough as I could. Little did I know that she was already in an affair with another man. So this is the typical social contract that most guys have going on in their heads when they engage a marriage. And what men still fail to understand is that family law and the female first primary social order that we live in today as men is hostile towards fathers. In fact, it does not care at all about fathers. In turn, it doesn't even care about the children, to be honest with you, because the underlying notion is everything in family law is to protect the best interests of the kids, but what's in the best interest of the children is to have equal access to both parents in a situation of divorce. But in most places in the world, still, provinces and states in Western parts of the world, it doesn't work that way. We'll continue through, and I'll keep adding some commentary on the points. One of the things that I should mention, guys, is if you haven't read my book, the Unplugged Alpha, it's available on Amazon, on Audible. I narrate it myself, or you can get it as a Kindle. Get this. You need to get your head around what the world really works like today for men. Had this guy read this before, he probably wouldn't be in this situation. So I put all this together based on all the stuff that I've come across in the last few years and through all the coaching I've done with well over 1,000 guys now, and distilled the most important stuff you need to understand so you can navigate the life that we have to live as men. Is basically a minefield, so you can avoid as many of the mines as possible. So check that out. It's on Amazon. The link is also pinned below. Anyway, he goes on to say, one night she demanded a divorce, and I wasn't surprised. We just weren't making any progress. No date nights, no sex, no sitting around and joking like things used to be, always avoiding each other. So be it. She laid out all my faults, and in a panic to keep my family together, I did beg to give it another shot. So this is typical. The guy, again, he subscribed to the happy wife, happy life narrative. Buy her the big house, give her the 3 children, bring home the bacon. She's supposed to cook it up. Only he's doing all those things, and behind the scenes, she's going to Pound Town with, I don't know, Kevin from sales, Steve from accounting. Who knows who this guy was? But this is more common than what men think. And we need to understand as men that, it doesn't matter if you subscribe to In Sickness and Health and Richer and Poor and blah, 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 and all that sort of thing. It's no buffer against female nature. There's a fundamental disconnect between what men believe work in marriage and what usually happens in most marriages. Keep in mind, most marriages end half the time after about 7 years. So 50% of the time, your failure rate is right there within about 7 to 8 years. The other part of that equation is they've done studies on marital happiness or long-term happiness, with couples. And I think the average time was something like 8.3 years. I have a video on this somewhere on my channel, but the average time was about 8.3 years. And I quote this in my book too. And believe it or not, only 13% of couples are still in love after that period of time. The amount of couples that are still living in a state of bliss, meaning they're obsessed with each other, is something like 3%. So you also have the part of the still married equation that aren't in love, aren't in bliss, and they're basically living together miserably because they don't have options to leave. They don't have the financial resources. Maybe they're not good looking enough. Maybe they're cowards. There could be any number of things that could be in play there, but it's a very, very high risk agreement for men to sign up for with fairly low rewards, as you're about to learn, and very low risk and high rewards for women, which again, you're about to learn. Anyway, so he says here, losing your wife is something, but it's hell of a thing to lose all those potential memories of raising your kids the traditional way of having those traditional memories. Christmas mornings, throwing the baseball with the son, tea time with the daughters. I couldn't see any of that happening as a divorced dad. After a short separation, we reconciled, but my spidey senses really started tingling, and I did some detective work. So not only is he has to work, bring home the bacon, pay for the mortgage and the cars and the children, he's also now put on the Sherlock Holmes hat. So he's become an investigator. We were supposed to be back together, but she was spending way too much time away from me and the kids, right? That's one of the key indicators. That's a serious red flag when you're in a marriage. I discovered the affair and kicked her to the curb. I will spend the rest of my life trying to process the hurt of being continuously lied to by the person I trusted the most in the world. You now have some idea of where I currently am in all this. We are newly divorced, and her other man has left her as well. Shocking, right? So here's my predicament. She is now seeking to keep me in a friend/husband zone by using the kids' needs to disguise her needs. She, by law, is the custodial guardian with child support and the whole 9 yards. I'm going to highlight that line and talk about that for a second. Women get primary caregiving rights. So custodial, I'm going to say ownership or custodial parenting rights, or the primary caregiver of the children, whatever the hell it is that you want to call it, about 80 to 90% of the time still. 80 to 90% of the time, when you get divorced, she's going to take half the matrimonial assets. She's also going to get child support when she's the custodial caregiver, which is why women go to become the primary caregiver of the children, because not only do they get half the shit, they get the kids, they also get child support, which, by the way, doesn't just cover the needs of the children. It more or less enriches her. And I break down some math in my book as well about how all that works. And there's a pretty good chance, he doesn't mention it here, that you will end up paying alimony as well, depending on how long you've been married and what state or province that you live in. So what usually ends up happening, and I think he goes on to say this over here, by law, I'm just a human ATM, okay? Now, if you don't know what an ATM is, because you live in a part in the world and you're going, what is that? It's automatic teller machine. You're basically a bank machine that spits out money on demand when you push keys. So he says, I'm basically a human ATM with visitation rights to his own children. Now, traditionally in the past, the biggest selling point to partnering with a woman and having children with her was you'd be able to pass on your genetic legacy, your name, your DNA, and your stuff. Okay. Now, in today's world where we live, you don't have those rights anymore. The biggest selling point has been completely removed from the equation of matrimony. And gentlemen like this are put in a position where they become an ATM, so they're just a bank machine with visitation rights to their own children. I can't fathom being in a position. I mean, I was lucky because I went through, and I mean, I was lucky to some degree, but I also prepared myself properly because I had a good lawyer and I did a lot of research before I untied the knot. But visitation rights are basically what my family lawyer called the screw over daddy deal, which means maybe if you're lucky, you get to see them every other weekend and like a Wednesday night for dinner. So let's assume that that's what he's got right now. So every other weekend, mommy's going out with her girlfriends to Pound Town with Chad from the nightclubs and the bars or whatever it is that she's doing while he's babysitting the kids. And then throughout the rest of the month, he's making his child support payments, alimony payments, and all that sort of stuff. Doesn't get to see his own children, doesn't get any influence to raise them. In some cases, a lot of men find themselves in a position where some other mofo that she starts dating or introduces the kids to or brings into the household, in some cases, the very house that you paid for, he moves into. And he spends more time with your kids than you do. That's a problem. And there's other problems that tie into that. I talk about it in my book as well, but there's also risks. If you have daughters, it sounds like this guy has 2 daughters, where some random dude, like outside DNA in a household is the highest risk factor to little girls growing up. I mean, boys don't get molested nearly as much as girls do. I mean, both of them do, obviously, but the highest risk factor to little girls is her making a bad choice, which, let's be honest, I mean, women aren't particularly great at making, smart choices when it comes to life like this, as you can see by this story over here. Will invite some dude into the house and could potentially expose your daughters to risk as she grows up, which, screws up more children throughout life. Something like 43% of kids today are raised in single parent households. That's what they use in the media, but the definition of the term single parent households because 80 to 90% of women get custody orders is basically they're saying single moms that, that actually saying it. So dude's in a position right now where he's not particularly happy, and I really can't blame him. We don't have a time machine to send him back into the past to make a better choice, to pick a potentially better woman. And two, I'm sure there's things that he did in the marriage that made him lose the frame in that relationship, meaning she became disinterested, or maybe he fell into her frame, for example, which can cause potential problems like this. Again, some of the many things that I talk about throughout the chapters in my book. But he wants to ask now, I would like to hear your opinion on how I deal with my strong desire to see and be with my kids without her holding that over me and using it against me. So what he's talking about, and I've had hundreds of coaching calls on this, like when people book me privately to talk about their problems, usually it's something around women, and more often than not, it has to do with either untying the knot, they've already untied the knot, and there's some element around that they're struggling with. At some point, I might have to put out a book on how to get, divorced like a boss, or some kind of course or something, because there's really just a ton to unpack. I mean, I've done it throughout a lot of the videos, and if you want to learn more about that, I'll put a card up on the top right of the screen. The divorce playlist for men, you can check that out. There's plenty of useful information in there. So that's the first starting part that I'd give you, my friend that made this request and sponsored the video, is watch the divorce playlist for dads there. You're going to get some use out of it. But he's in a position now where the knot's been untied, the dust has settled, she has custody, he's obviously, still making the bank, treated as an ATM, and now he has visitation rights. And now she's trying to leverage the kids against him by, typically what that looks like is, hey, Bill, the internet's not working at the house. How do I fix the Wi-Fi? And then he's the kind of guy that'll go over and fix the Wi-Fi, because, her story will be like the kids need access to their iPads so they can do their homework or to study, or, whatever the story is. But, realistically, it's her wanting to horse around on her phone and, scroll through Instagram or TikTok or some dating app or some shit like that. And that gets frustrating for guys. It happens a lot. I've seen, there was an article that I shared on Twitter the other day where the story was something along the lines of, dude's been divorced for 28 years, but still mows his ex-wife's lawn. That's true love. Like, dude, that, like, the stories that the media put together to support and endorse simping at biblical proportions is just off the chart. This is just where we are in society, and it's fine. Fine. Let's just be honest about it and accept it. I'm the only one telling you guys these cold hard truth bombs, right? This is the experience that a lot of men have. Not every man, obviously, in divorce. As the old saying goes, not every woman can, not every woman will destroy a man in family court, but every woman can if she so chooses. The problem, which again I dive into my book, is female nature basically encourages or facilitates the destruction of the male through the family court system. So he's in an incredibly bad position. He's in a very, very bad bargaining position. He doesn't have a lot of negotiating power. He doesn't have a lot of pull in this whatsoever. The kids and holding it over me, using it against me. I'm currently in monk mode is what he says, putting the work in. So I've shut off my personal social media. Thank you. Okay. So let's just pull this out of the screen here and just go full screen for a second. So what do you do in a situation where your ex-wife has basically destroyed your life and you can't even father your own children? First thing you have to do, if I'm being honest, is surrender to the reality of where you're at. Some guys will go and do like crazy stuff, and that results in breaking the law, leaving the country, taking the kids. There's all kinds of stuff that I've heard guys do, and it's tough. It's one of the hardest things that men have to deal with. I mean, it's one of the reasons why a lot of guys after a divorce living in a situation like this, they just can't deal with it. And sometimes they take permanent steps to a temporary problem in their life. I mean, you got to keep in mind that your kids are going to grow up. They might be, he's got 3. So let's say, they might be 6, 8, and 10 right now, for example. Well, in anywhere from, 10 to 14 years, they're all going to be 20-year-olds. And in 10 to 14 years, they're going to be very, very different people. And while you may be prevented from having much influence in their lives, playing baseball with them after school, having tea time, with your daughters, tucking them in at bed every night, of the week. There's nothing you can do to change that unless you can sit her down and have a conversation and say, hey, our kids really need both of their parents. They're losing out on these opportunities. I'd like to propose a shared parenting deal. Who knows? Maybe she would go for it. Maybe because, she's a kind person and she wants what's best for the children. She's going to say, yeah, you know what, Bill, I agree. I'm going to stop taking, child support from you. I'm going to let you have the kids half the time. I'm going to stop being able to be the custodial caregiver and make all unilateral decisions when it comes to everything, for the kids. Women aren't likely to give that up. Have the talk, though. Okay. At least you can say, look, I had the talk and I tried. You can tell your kids when they get older, I tried, I had the talk and I tried. This is what happened, right? And then from there, now that you've surrendered to whatever the reality is and you've accepted it, you've come to peace with it, you've come to terms with it, whatever you've needed to do, whether you rubbed your energy crystals or had some Wusa meditation chant or, read a few books to understand, where you are and why you're at. Now that you've surrendered to it, now you move forward in this new world order, this new paradigm shift that you're in. And you do the absolute best that you can to parent those kids with the time that you have, with the financial resources that you have left over after the state has taken, treated you like an ATM that month and moved your financial resources from you to her. When all that happens and all the dust is settled, you've got a hand dealt to you. And in any card game, it's like, you play the hand that you've been dealt. And when you play the hand that you've been dealt, you make the best out of it. And that's all that you can do. The upshot of all of this is you've got some spare time. I know you probably don't want to hear it, but you've got some spare time. So what are you now going to do with that time when you don't have the responsibility to parent those children that the state have essentially, and your ex-wife have, essentially taken away from you? You now have, I don't know, here in Canada, let's say, if you're given primary caregiving rights, that usually means the mother's got the kids somewhere between 70 to 80% of the time, depending on what the parenting schedule looks like over the holidays and summers and all that sort of stuff. Ask for longer time during the summers. If you have 3 or 4 weeks vacation, then, book that time with the kids and try to do something, within your budget, try to bond with them, especially if they're young, because by the time they go to the tween years, they don't want to have as much to do with you. So if they're younger, now is the time to try to form those bonds and those connections and all that sort of stuff. And again, you've surrendered to the reality of it. You've looked at it. You've understood the landscape. It's like when you go outside and it's a hot, sunny day, you can't get mad at the sun for being hot and sunny and it's going to sunburn you, right? You understand it's hot and sunny. I need to stay hydrated. If I'm going to stay out in the sun, I either got to wear a hat or long sleeve shirt or put on some sunscreen. You adapt. It's the same sort of thing. This is the reality of post-divorce for you right now. This is who you married. This is who you divorced. This is the custody arrangement that you have with your kids. This is everything that, you can possibly do, to make it right. And then you do the best that you can with that. Take your spare time, level yourself up, maybe start a side hustle, create a business. I don't know, start a podcast, a YouTube channel, tell your story about this if that's something that you want to do. Write a book if there's a lesson in there that might be useful. Create a journal. I don't know, write a book and give the book to your kids when they get older. I don't know. I mean, there's any number of things that you can do. Don't just sit there and wallow in misery. That's one of the worst things that you can do when you're in a position like this, is just sulk. You go deep down a rabbit hole, and then you start watching stuff on YouTube like, 3,700 reasons why bitches ain't shit but hoes and tricks. Don't spend a lot of time wallowing in self-pity, right? It is what it is. You've surrendered to it. You've accepted it. You want to be a dad. You're going to do the best that you can with the time that you have. You have some spare time right now, which is a bit of a plus. You will come to embrace that at some point. Eventually most men do. So make the most out of it with what you can with your financial resources and time that you have available to you. Not much else you can do, my brother. So again, the two parts of this lesson to the younger guys out there that are considering, this is what this guy went through. Read my book. There's lots of excellent lessons in there. It's pinned in the top comment. And at some point, guys, I am going to put out some kind of course on how to get divorced like a boss, whether it's in a book or a paid course or something like that, to try to organize this information better, because something like this can generally be avoided. I could have been in this position. I share custody. Okay. So I don't have to deal with anybody making unilateral, choices about what happens to my kid, medical choices, moving choices, anything like that. There's no money flowing out of my life. I'm not treated like an ATM. So all of those things can be set aside if you exit the divorce machine in a prepared manner. So I will have something like that in the future. But again, that divorce playlist on the top right of the screen has a lot of useful information. Anyway, smash the like button, comment below, check out the links pinned in the top comment. And if you have a requested topic you want to do like this guy, there's a link down in the pinned top comment somewhere. You can check that out. So we'll see you guys in the next video. Have an awesome day. Peace.